Well, we always have a pretty extensive process of analyzing feedback. People that are on our forums don't see me posting in there, but I'm reading it. If you've posted something about Mass Effect on YouTube, I've probably read it. So our fans have a voice that gets heard. And it's usually a process that we do, obviously throughout a game, but especially once we've shipped something. For a couple of months, we shift into a period of really listening to what people are saying, and trying to understand it and analyze it. Because what we don't try to do is just build exactly what people tell us we should build, because then there's no surprise in it, and it's not necessarily exactly what they would want. But what we do try to do is, all feedback is valid, and all feedback is true for that person, and in some way that we probably need to address. So we take it very seriously that way, and then we try to analyze, how do we address this in terms of a game design that doesn't just become, a piecemeal collection of different solutions, but it still has that kind of elegant simplicity to it. How do we build that in? And then that's kind of how we try to build our next game. When we shipped Mass Effect 1, the first thing that we did was we took all the feedback that we could find, all the reviews, the forum stuff, and we literally started cutting and pasting comments. And so we had like one file that had all the positive comments and one that had all kinds of critical comments. And then we started categorizing them into like enemy AI or graphics or whatever. And that became like a list of, almost prioritized list of things that basically people in a meta sense were telling us needed to be different. And so one of the top things from Mass Effect 1 was, in the end, we weren't able to reduce the texture load in to the degree that we wanted to. It came right down to the wire, and we got it better and better, but it wasn't as good as we would have wanted. And that was actually one of the biggest pieces of feedback we had on the first game. And so that became the top priority thing for us. It doesn't mean that was the most important thing in the game, but it was just one of those things that here's like basically our list of 5 things that these things have to happen, because we can't not fix these things that people have asked us to. And then other things just down through, AI and vehicles and all that kind of stuff. So we had a list of not even specific changes, but categories. We had, I think it was 48 categories of changes that we implemented for Mass Effect 2, and we ended up doing them all. And then within each of those, there are a few changes. Like combat, for example, was just one category, but it was a huge list of things that we did. So, yeah, you think about the millions of people who play, all the different media that they have to share their feedback. There's a lot of commentary out there, but we still try and mine it. And then, like I say, every bit of feedback is valid and true for the person who's giving it. So we need to take it seriously and analyze what it means in terms of something we need to resolve in the game. The victory for us with Mass Effect 2 was that even though we did make a lot of big changes to the way that you play the game and the way that the systems work and things like that, in general, on balance, it was extremely well received, just really better than we could have ever hoped. It's one of the highest rated games of all time. But that doesn't mean that we don't still look at criticisms from fans and feedback and trying to understand how we can still make Mass Effect 3 better. And so that's where I think we hit the right kind of systems and the right kind of gameplay for what a Mass Effect game should be about. But there's improvements that we can and are making across the board. But we're not fundamentally changing things. But what we are doing, for example, is we're looking at the feedback that we've had that people want more out of the RPG systems, and they want more depth and they want more customization. And so we're doing a lot of those things. But we're doing it in the style that you had in Mass Effect 2, where you still have weapons the way they work in Mass Effect 2, and you still have armor lockers and stuff like that. But now you've got a lot more to buy at stores, and you've got a lot more to customize your armor and your weapons. And when you're modifying a weapon, you see it sitting on the table, and you're seeing parts click in and out of it, and you have a lot of options to do with that. So we're coming back to a place where you have the customizability that you had in Mass Effect 1 and a lot of those choices in that activity chain, but combining it with the way that the systems were really fun and I think well presented in Mass Effect 2. But also, again, just kind of going back and improving the way that all of this stuff works and the way it all looks. Well, from the beginning, we actually knew the high-level story arc. Like the basic premise of what each game was going to be about. And that allowed us to have an idea where we're going with the major characters and with Shepard and the larger forces in the galaxy and things like that. But what we stayed open to is being able to react to things that were working really well about the way we tell stories or the way that certain characters are received and so on. For example, when we were designing Mass Effect 1, we actually didn't know how well our alien characters would work. We knew that this would be a very realistic looking game by comparison to Xbox games, which is what we were coming out of, and we were thinking, what's the next Xbox going to be capable of, because it didn't even have a name at that point. And so we're trying to visualize what is possible with these characters. And one thing that we thought at the time was we're going to create digital actors, and we had an idea for how well those would work. But we thought we need to be careful about making too many aliens in the environment or putting too much acting and emotion on the aliens because they're not human. And we didn't know that if they would be able to be as expressive as humans. And as it turns out, partly because they're not human and partly because the technology and the art worked out so well, our aliens are almost more human than our humans. They have incredible emotion. And when we made Mass Effect 1 and we saw how people reacted to it, we saw that they wanted romances with Garrus, who's a character with an exoskeleton. These amazing reactions to our characters that showed us we can start relying more on these characters to carry more of the emotion of the story. And so we did that with Mass Effect 2. Garrus became more of Shepard's buddy. And that relationship really worked better than we would have planned ahead of time. And in fact, Garrus can be a romance character, which was probably our most popular romance character. And we never would have known that until we had built the first game. So we can react to those kinds of things as we go. But knowing kind of where things are going allows us to put it in a context where it's still all going to fit. It's not like we have to come up with some crazy new excuse to start a new story. It's all kind of there. With Mass Effect 2, it was kind of different because there wasn't the volume of criticism or critical comments that we had, and the areas were a lot fewer than we had on Mass Effect 1. So we had kind of fewer things to resolve, but one of them was that people recognized that if you come into an area and there's lots of low cover height stuff, then there's going to be a fight, even before we've brought up the dramatic tension that should tell you you're in a fight. So that obviously was something we wanted to improve. So that became a whole list of things that we wanted Shepard to do differently. So it's things like there's much better types of cover built into the environment better. Shepard is able to move between them a lot better. And so we kind of morphed that into just what other things should Shepard be able to do in an environment so that the environment itself is more credible. And so Shepard is able to do SWAT turns from one cover to the other. You can mantle with a single button instead of getting into cover first. You can climb things, you can fall down things, and it's very much a much more free-form environmental exploration thing while you're in combat. And then also just the idea of, to further break the idea that you see a little battlefield and you know you're going to have a fight, we're doing a lot more redirects in terms of the level. So you see an area and you think, okay, I'm going to go through here and maybe have a fight. You might not actually ever get to that area because something amazing will happen and the floor breaks through and now you're in the basement, or you're you're going through a cave and it gets blocked off, and just constantly redirecting the player so that you kind of build a sense that anything could happen versus building in a sense of security and kind of knowing what's going to happen next.